Hi, how you doing? And welcome back to another video on the channel. So, what I've got for you today is a wildcard draft team for game week 3. Even if you're not wildcarding, hopefully it'll help you out with your transfer planning moving forward. I am recording this before Sunday's games have kicked off, but if there are any injuries, I will post some alternative players in the comments. I'll also discuss them during the video as well. We do have some interesting picks, and I do try and use data to back up my selection. So if you do like the style and you've got an opinion on some of the players, please do subscribe, comment your thoughts. I am closing in on 500 subscribers, which for a small channel trying to grow would be a really cool milestone. So thank you everyone for all the support so far. So let's take a look at the team, and it is 95% rated, which I think is a pretty good rating, but more importantly, it comes in at 99.1 million, which is a price that everyone can afford. And I really wanted to get it under 100 million with price rises because there's no point giving you a wildcard team that you can't afford, but it does give you a bit of scope to upgrade the team if you prefer different players in certain areas. So in goal, we've gone for Matt Sells, and he was the goalkeeper last week. And with goalkeepers, there's not too much scope for change. The fixtures aren't going to alter drastically, and Nottingham Forest fixtures are pretty good. West Ham, Burnley, and Sunderland. Before game week 6, I think he is someone that even with the manager uncertainty for Nottingham Forest can still perform well. And we know he's consistent because when we look at the goalkeeper's saves per game last season, Matt Sells rates pretty well, especially because he played every game. He was averaging over 3 saves per game. And that tells me that even if he loses his clean sheet to some of the more difficult fixtures, like he's got Arsenal and Newcastle coming up, he is more than likely going to get you a save point. A lot of teams don't keep clean sheets in most games, but when that happens, is your goalkeeper going to get you that extra point or two for those saves? And Matt Sells has shown last season that he is that consistent player that can do that. So in defence, I've gone for Cucurella, Romero, and Dan Burn with a couple of cheap options on the bench. On the bench, what I've done is I've gone for a defensive player, whether that be a goalkeeper or a defender, from each of the promoted sides. I think that's really important to just spread out because each of them have shown that they could win at home, not do very well away. So I think if one of them has a game at home, I wouldn't have a problem starting them, but what I don't want to do is put 2 or 3 players from the same team, same promoted team in there, because then when they play away, your bench is a lot more limited. So I just think that's an extra little point just to consider. Back to the starting defenders, and I've got 2 5 million defenders in here, which might seem a little bit overkill for the price, quite an expensive defense. But Dan Burn and Romero both have good fixtures coming up, and they are good for defensive contributions as well. Cucurella is my starting defender, my premium defender. I think he is someone who can get attacking returns, as we've seen, and Chelsea look like they're going to have a pretty good season. Romero is someone who, whilst you could get in Pedro Porro, and you could definitely afford him with this team, I just like Romero for his defensive contributions. Spurs have kept 2 clean sheets in the first 2 games, and that's obviously not going to continue. But when you look at the fixtures, West Ham, Wolves, and Leeds before game week 7 looks really good. They've also got Aston Villa in there at home who haven't been clicking at the moment. And when you compare and look at points per game, so this is for last season. So if you want to pause the video at any point and just take a closer look at the charts, feel free to do so. But points per game for last season is pretty interesting when you include Romero's points for this season. He would rank here. Now, again, obviously he's not going to keep this going for the full season, but I did think it was interesting to compare how he's doing this season versus everybody else's points per game last season. Now, this hugely relies on Spurs continuing to keep clean sheets, but I don't see why for the next few fixtures at least that couldn't be the case. And if not Romero, he's now got defensive contributions to include as well. And I do think he's someone that can get those at quite a good rate. So into midfield, and a bit of an interesting midfield here because I've gone for Sarr from Crystal Palace. I do think that he can get you some more attacking returns. Now, Eze's gone, he's going to have to be a more focal point of the attack. Now, that could work the opposite way because defenses might just focus on Sa a bit more because now they've not got Eze to deal with. But Crystal Palace can also get some players in that position as well that can help the attack. But I think at 6.5 million, Sa looks a pretty good choice. Matthias Cunha is the highlighted player here, and you might think, why are you getting in Matthias Cunha when he's got Man City, Chelsea, and Liverpool before game week 8, and he's not actually scored any points yet? Well, because you're using your wild card in this situation, you have to plan for the next 15 weeks. You're not going to get another wild card until game week 18, game week 19. So in that case, you've just got one free transfer to work with every week until then. And some weeks you're going to be saving those up. So you can't just look at the immediate short term. You've got to look at these players who are going to be good over the long term. And I think we've got that in Matthias Cunha. Now, Man United are still figuring it out. But when we take a look at the chart for last season, we can see bonus points were a huge part of Matthias Cunha's game. So bonus points per price, basically what I did was I divided all their bonus points last season by their price for this season. And this is the chart. And we can see that Matthias Cunha last season for value was head and shoulders above everyone else for bonus points. Now, is that going to continue this season? You could very easily argue that Man United have to share out the attacking contributions between Sesko, Mbumo, Bruno Fernandes, and therefore the bonus points might be a little bit more spread. But we know that Matthias Cunha really collects those bonus points for fun. He doesn't have to do too much in a game, and if he scores or gets an attacking return in general, he will get bonus points. So I do think that he is still the best, you know, midfielder at that price for value. I think if you're looking for other players, you could probably just select from this area here because all of these players are still collecting bonus points. Now, again, because this is from last season, because we only have 1 or 2 games worth of data this year so far, you could argue that Mbumo, Bruno Fernandes, Matthias Cunha sort of trio, Man United, we don't know how they're going to work out. I would still expect them to do quite well for bonus points, and it is at least interesting. If you wanted to get in a Brian Mbumo, instead of a Matthias Cunha, absolutely go for it. Unfortunately, we can't afford Bruno Fernandes in this team, but if you already have some of these players that we've got that have moved up in price, then you could totally go for Bruno Fernandes if you can afford it. I think he's also a good option, but Matthias Cunha is probably the more exciting pick at this stage. So up front, we've gone quite big, really, with the strikers, and I've still got Strand Larsen in there. I know Wolves haven't scored yet this season, but they're not going to not score in every single game, right? They are going to score at some point. And I just think among the 6.5 million picks up front, Strand Larsen just looks the best one. I've also got Chris Wood in there. Now, this is a little bit of an out there pick, and you could totally swap to a Mateta. You can even downgrade to another 6.5 million if you want to save a bit more money to upgrade elsewhere. But I think Chris Wood, until the Champions League games sort of kick off, or not Champions League, but European games kick off, I think he's a good pick. And even then, he might still remain the same. But what you've got to do is just kind of look to the medium term. And I think Chris Wood, after scoring 2 goals in game week 1, just looks really clinical. And we're all there thinking he's not going to be able to keep it going. But he might keep it going. He did last season for the most part. So I think he is a good pick. And West Ham coming up next game, I think is a really good time to get him in. I've highlighted Victor Gyökeres here, a bit like Bruno Fernandes. You could say, why are you getting him in now with those fixtures? They look terrible. But after game week 6, everyone's going to be getting him in. He's just scored 2 goals against Leeds, so he's, getting that confidence. And I think if you're wild carding, I think it is worth getting him in now. It's totally different if you're not wild carding and you're getting him in on a free transfer. I probably wouldn't use a free transfer on him at this stage. But I think if you want to get ahead of the game and play the mid to long term, he's someone who you should probably be looking at because in after game week 6, if loads of people are transferring him in, his price is going to go up. And if you've already got him in, It just saves you that free transfer to address another potential issue in your squad. So when we take a look at the points per game versus starts for last season, we can see Victor Gyökeres would be here. So this is everyone else's points for last season, but I've added in Victor Gyökeres' points for this season. So again, a bit like Romero, really small sample size. Everyone else did it across a full season. He's only done it across 2 games, but it is looking promising, right? Isn't it? And I wouldn't necessarily expect him to be the best striker in the game for points per game, but I would expect him to be in among that top group. Your Isaacs, your Haaland, your Ollie Watkins, your Chris Wood, with across the season. So I think he is someone that is just as good as anybody else. And now he's got off the mark for Arsenal. He is a really interesting pick to get in. So overall, I think the strengths are that it prepares for future fixtures. So we've talked about the medium to long term. And again, that is something that you do need to be aware of when you are using a wild card is that longer term picture. And it is a well balanced team. I think I've spread the funds out quite well. We've got some big hitters in there. We've also got some good defensive options as well. An expensive defense, but I don't think it's taken away from the rest of the squad. The weaknesses eyes maybe is there too much money up front? Could you cut down a Chris Wood? Could you even go from a Strand Larson to a Mark Gui from Sunderland? But I think if I'd have done that, it would have just made the bench look too weak. I'd have to have put Kudus in there full time, and then you've not really got any bench options, which when you're planning for the long term could hinder you a lot. I also think the bench isn't super strong, but I think these 4 million defenders, like I explained earlier, are good value. And when are playing at home, could offer you some good points ticking over. They could at least get some defensive contributions. And this season, they could be getting you 3 or 4 points rather than 1 or 2, which does add up over the course of a game week. So that's the squad. Let me know what you think in the comments. Always prepared to be wrong with some of these players. And for what it's worth, I do also think that it's maybe a little bit early to be wildcarding. I think if you're looking at using your wildcard this game week, maybe wait until next game week for the international break because a lot of injuries can come up during that time frame and it's something that can just affect your squad more than you would realize. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. Please do subscribe if you're new to the channel. Go check out my other videos as well, and I will see you in the next one.